Welcome to TrueStars Stories, the place where dramatic, inspiring, and unexpected stories about CEOs and entrepreneurs are told in the most authentic and captivating way. In this video, you will follow the stormy journey of a powerful Black woman CEO who dared to do the unthinkable, firing her entire board of directors from her own company. You will go through 8 chapters, each with 4 parts, where hidden truths are revealed one by one. The real reason behind her shocking decision, the betrayals and secret plots, the moments she stood on the edge of collapse, and finally, her powerful rebirth, transforming from the betrayed into the one who rewrote corporate history. This is not just a drama full of suspense, but also an inspiring journey about the courage, intelligence, and strength of a woman of color who dared to stand against the world. And you will definitely want to know, after firing her entire board, what unthinkable event happened next? If you enjoy dramatic and inspiring stories, make sure to subscribe to TrueStars Stories and turn on the notification bell, so you won't miss any chapter of this thrilling journey. On what seemed like an ordinary Monday morning in New York's financial district, the glass towers of Halcyon Capital shimmered in the sunlight. Employees rushed in with coffee cups in hand, never suspecting that the day would become a historic turning point, not just for the company, but for the entire American financial industry. On the top floor, in an office sleek yet elegant, the company's first Black woman CEO, Amara Johnson, stood before the mirror, adjusting her sharp black blazer. No one could see the storm raging beneath her calm surface. Amara was not someone who lost her temper easily. Before reaching this powerful position, she had endured years of being dismissed, doubted, even mocked, simply because she was a woman of color in a world dominated by white men in gray suits. She knew all too well what it meant to be underestimated, and that very underestimation had forged her into steel. But this morning was different. This morning, Amara knew one thing for certain. She was about to declare war on her own board of directors. To understand this mad decision, we must rewind a few weeks earlier. The board, composed of middle-aged men with salt and pepper hair sitting smugly in their ice-cold conference room, had secretly voted to restrict her authority. They claimed Amara was too young, too impulsive, too bold when she advised, pulling back from risky real estate investments in China. In reality, Amara had been right. Just a month later, the bubble burst, wiping out billions. But instead of admitting their failure, the board blamed her for not following protocol. What a farce! She could still recall the scene vividly. One board member sneered, "Amara, remember this. Here, we make the decisions, and you just carry them out." The room erupted in condescending laughter. Amara smiled back, cool and composed. But inside she swore never again would anyone dare to underestimate her. That night, as Wall Street's lights slowly dimmed, Amara remained in her office. The glow from her laptop screen lit up her face, etched with determination. In the silence, she combed through financial reports, emails, and every small detail the board had tried to bury. She wasn't just a CEO, she had once been an auditor before stepping into the cutthroat world of finance. And in the world of numbers, the truth can only stay hidden for so long. Amara uncovered what the board never wanted revealed. They had authorized massive kickbacks to favored partners in exchange for lucrative deals. On paper, the numbers looked tidy. But anyone with financial expertise could smell the fraud beneath. The irony burned. Those same men who mocked her as too bold were gambling with company money as recklessly as drunk gamblers at a casino. In that moment, Amara realized the cruel truth. The board didn't just want to sideline her. They wanted to set her up as the fall guy, the perfect scapegoat, if their money laundering scheme collapsed. If she did nothing, one day her name would flash across the front page, Halcyon Capital's first Black woman CEO caught in financial scandal, and when that happened, no one would care about the truth. She let out a small laugh, cold and metallic. She would not sit and wait for her downfall. No, Amara Johnson would strike first. A bold, almost insane plan sparked in her mind. To eliminate the entire board of directors once and for all. Amara's plan did not begin with grand meetings or bold declarations. It began with silence. She silently observed, silently gathered evidence, and silently waited for the perfect moment. In the world of finance, she knew, information was more valuable than gold. A stray internal email, a hastily signed contract, even a casual hallway conversation, any of these could become weapons. And Amara, meticulous as a patient hunter, pieced together fragments until she held the full picture. Of course, she couldn't carry out her plan alone. Amara quietly sought out an unlikely ally, Marcus, the head of legal, a black man the board had once passed over for promotion because he supposedly didn't fit the brand image. Marcus was cautious, the type who rarely voiced his opinions. But when Amara laid a stack of confidential documents in front of him, his eyes lit up as if he had just rediscovered his reason to fight. "If you want to take them down," Marcus said slowly, "then I'll stand with you until the end." Together, they began building a massive evidence vault. Every email, every shady transaction, every offshore account was carefully logged. Amara even hired an independent team of legal experts to validate the findings, ensuring they could stand firm in court. But she didn't stop at the law. She understood that in the age of social media, sometimes public opinion moved faster than justice. So, alongside the official files, Amara prepared a media strike. Real stories from employees pushed out by the board's reckless policies, small investors duped into golden opportunities that were nothing but traps. All of it, Amara knew, would be explosive. The only question left was when to press the button. The quarterly board meeting arrived, and the atmosphere inside Halcyon Capital's grand conference room was thick with tension. The glass walls reflected the faces of 12 men seated in a long row, arms folded, eyes gleaming with arrogance. They thought today would be just another session of dictating orders to Amara, forcing her to rubber stamp the reckless investments they had been quietly preparing. But Amara entered the room with a calm smile, like an actress ready for the performance of her life. Her tailored black blazer made her look both commanding and unreadable, and each step across the hardwood floor echoed like a drum roll. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice low yet sharp as a blade. "Today, I have some very interesting documents to share." The room went silent. A few members arched their brows with faint smirks, thinking this was just another attempt to prove her competence. But the moment Amara pressed the button, the massive screen behind her lit up. Spreadsheets, internal emails, and offshore account maps appeared, each one a dagger aimed at the board's reputation. "This," Amara pointed to one contract, "is the deal you approved, resulting in a $200 million loss. And this," she flicked to the next slide, "is a list of personal accounts receiving consulting fees from our Chinese partners." Whispers rippled through the room. Some faces went pale, others growled in protest, but Amara didn't stop. She locked eyes with them, her smile cold and deliberate. "You can call me too impulsive. You can say I don't fit the company culture. But one thing you cannot deny. I have the truth in my hands. And as of today, the rules of the game have changed." The room erupted. Several men shot to their feet, slamming fists on the table, shouting denials. But one fact was undeniable. For the first time in Halcyon's history, the almighty board of directors, those who once held all the power, had been forced into defense by a woman of color. And this was only the beginning. The news exploded faster than anyone in that boardroom could have imagined. Within hours, Amara's presentation slides had leaked. No one knew exactly how, though it was certainly no accident. A few financial reporters, longtime contacts of Marcus, received an anonymous gift package via email. By the next morning, the front page of the Wall Street Journal delivered its verdict. Halcyon Capital, accused of financial manipulation. CEO faces off against board. Wall Street was in uproar. Small investors panicked, while big hedge fund managers quietly called Amara, fishing for an official stance. But the biggest surprise came from the public. On Twitter, the hashtag #UnderstandWithAmara began trending, spreading like wildfire within hours. To many, Amara wasn't just a CEO fighting corruption. She was the symbol of a black woman daring to rise in a world built to hold her down. One late-night talk show even mocked the board. While Halcyon's directors are busy counting offshore accounts, their CEO is busy counting hashtags of support. The audience roared with laughter, but beneath the humor lay a bitter truth. The board's reputation was collapsing by the hour. Amara, meanwhile, stayed silent. She gave no interviews, issued no rushed statements. Instead, she sat in her office, reading every article, every comment. And with each word, she felt her strength grow. For the first time, Amara realized she wasn't standing alone. An entire crowd out there was standing with her. She knew then. This battle had moved beyond the glass walls of the boardroom. It was now a public war, and in the sunlight, everything would be exposed. The board of directors did not sit idly by, waiting to be destroyed. Within days, they launched a fierce counterattack. A crisis management PR firm was hired for an astronomical fee, and their mission was crystal clear: turn Amara from hero of justice into reckless, inexperienced, and untrustworthy. Strange articles began to surface. A financial paper claimed CEO Amara Johnson once made a catastrophic mistake that cost the company millions. Another blog screamed, "Black woman CEO, too young, too impulsive, too reckless." It was obvious. Someone was orchestrating a wave of doubt. The men in the shadows knew. If they couldn't defeat the truth, the next best move was to destroy the image of the person who held it. Amara read those articles with an almost chilling calm. She recognized the tactic: character assassination. It was an old trick. When you can't refute the data, you attack the person. But Amara wasn't afraid. She knew that if she lashed out, she would fall right into their trap. So once again, she chose silence, not to observe this time, but to prepare a response so devastating it could not be ignored. In a private conversation with Marcus, she smirked and said, "Funny, isn't it? They think a few cut-and-paste hit pieces can break me. They forget I grew up in a world that doubted me every single day, and I'm still standing here." Marcus smiled, nodding slowly. "If they want to play dirty, then we'll play transparent. And transparency, Amara, will be the death of them." 1 week after the flood of attacks against her, Amara made her first public appearance, not at a grand press conference, nor on national television. Instead, she chose to live stream from her own office, plain, unscripted, without a polished PR team. The move shocked everyone. In the corporate world, CEOs rarely spoke without layers of handlers. But Amara wanted something different: to speak directly, without filters. "Hello, everyone," she began, her voice low but warm. "I know there's been a lot of news about me in this company. Instead of letting others tell the story, today I want to tell it myself." She then displayed the documents, not cherry-picked snippets like the media had shown, but the originals. Emails with subject lines, contracts with signatures, detailed transaction logs. Viewers could hardly believe their eyes. A CEO openly sharing internal documents? This was unprecedented in Wall Street history. Twitter and LinkedIn exploded. Small investors flooded timelines with the hashtag #TruthWithAmara. Independent lawyers went live, analyzing the evidence in real time, confirming it had undeniable legal weight. And most importantly, the contrast became clear. On one side, a board hiding behind polished statements. On the other, Amara, standing. Tall, staring straight into the camera, exposing the truth. In finance, Amara closed the live stream. We often say, trust is the greatest asset. Today, I am not asking for your trust. I am giving you mine through the truth. As she ended the stream, Marcus chuckled softly beside her. They tried to assassinate your character, Amara, but instead, you just redefined leadership in the digital age. Amara's live stream hit Wall Street like a bomb. While millions of views and shares continued to skyrocket, on the other side, the board of directors were in near panic. They convened an emergency meeting that same night, their faces flushed, with a mix of anger and fear. She's overstepped. One member slammed his fist on the table. She exposed internal documents that could destroy the company. But deep down, they all knew what truly terrified them wasn't the leaks. It was the fact that Amara had captured the public narrative. Investors, clients, even company employees, all were rallying behind her. Some younger staff even formed an online group called Amara's Army, openly declaring their loyalty to their CEO. Desperate to regain control, the board made a reckless decision. They would call a special vote to strip Amara of her authority under the charge of professional misconduct. They believed this would stop the media storm and secure their seats of power. But they were wrong. Amara was no helpless prey to be cornered. When Marcus brought her the news, she leaned back in her chair and smirked. Interesting. They want to use corporate law against me. But they forget. I know that rule book better than anyone in that room. Her eyes gleamed. If the board wanted a public battle, Amara was ready to turn it into theater, one the entire world would watch. And in that theater, the ones who exit to applause are never the villains. On Monday morning, the Halcyon Capitol building lit up earlier than usual. But instead of the usual buzz of business, the air felt like a battlefield bracing for war. The board of directors had issued an official notice. A special vote would be held to decide the leadership qualifications of CEO Amara Johnson. The news spread like wildfire. Reporters swarmed the building's entrance, employees whispered nervously in the elevators, and investors couldn't sit still. Everyone knew this wasn't just another meeting. It was a fight for survival that could determine the company's fate. Amara entered the building with an almost unnerving calm. She wore a navy blue power suit, the color of confidence and resilience. A few younger employees discreetly raised clenched fists of support as she walked past, and Amara simply nodded, her lips curving into a reassuring smile. Deep down, she knew. Today, she wasn't just defending her title as CEO. She was defending the dignity of everyone who believed in the change she represented. Inside the boardroom, the tension was so thick it could be cut with a knife. Microphones were switched on, thick stacks of documents neatly placed before each member. The chairman cleared his throat and spoke in a dry, brittle voice. Today, we will discuss and vote on whether Amara Johnson remains fit to lead this company. The room fell into heavy silence. Every eye turned toward Amara, but she did not flinch. She knew this battle was not just about ballots. It was about truth versus lies, the old guard versus the new, a rotten system versus one woman determined to tear it down. The meeting opened with a barrage of accusations. Charles Whitmore, the board's infamous old fox of Wall Street, leaned into the microphone, his voice dripping with mockery. Amara, you probably think you're some kind of hero for releasing those documents. But look at the result. Our stock dropped 12% in just 1 week. You didn't just hurt yourself, you hurt thousands of shareholders. What kind of CEO behaves like that? You're sabotaging your own company. Murmurs spread around the room. A few members nodded, trying to create the illusion of consensus. But Amara sat motionless, her eyes locked on him. Then, Eleanor, the only female board member, though firmly in the conservative camp, jumped in. Ms. Johnson, do you really Think live streaming confidential documents to the public is transparency? I call it recklessness. You're turning this company into a laughingstock on social media. The room filled with barbed words, each one different in tone, but identical in aim. To paint Amara as reckless, out of control. When every eye turned toward her, Amara leaned slightly forward, placing her hand firmly on the table. She gave a faint smile, her voice calm yet razor-sharp. Interesting. You say I've sabotaged the company, but it was you who approved the dirty deals that turned Halcyon into a breeding ground of corruption. I didn't bring this company to the edge. You did that long ago. All I've done is bring light into the darkness where you've grown so comfortable. The air in the room froze. Even the legal clerk scribbling notes in the corner looked up, stunned by her audacity. Amara's words weren't just a rebuttal. They were a blade slicing straight into the board's credibility. The room fell into tense silence after Amara's sharp rebuttal. Some board members frowned, others tapped their fingers anxiously on the table. The atmosphere was so heavy that a single spark could ignite it. And Amara was the one holding the match. Calmly, she reached for the leather case at her side and pulled out a thick stack of documents neatly bound. Marcus, seated at the back, gave her a subtle nod, as though they had both been waiting for this very moment. You call me reckless, Amara began slowly. But this is what true recklessness looks like. She laid the documents on the table, one in front of each board member. The once arrogant faces immediately drained of color. Inside were copies of offshore contracts, secret wire transfers, and internal emails with verified digital signatures, all pointing directly to corrupt collusion. One member stammered, pale as paper, "This could be fabricated!" Amara laughed, but it was a cold laugh. Oh, fabricated? How unfortunate. Independent legal experts have already verified their authenticity. And just to be sure, I submitted the originals to the Securities and Exchange Commission this very morning. Her words crashed like thunder. A few members slammed the table in frustration, others whispered frantically in panic. They all knew, once the SEC stepped in, every shadowy trick would be dragged into the light. Amara didn't need to say another word. She sat tall, her eyes blazing, letting the silence tell the story. Because by now, everyone understood. The balance of power had begun to shift. The boardroom had turned into a cauldron of chaos. Some members frantically flipped through the documents, their faces paling as if they were staring at death sentences. Others lashed out in desperation, trying to corner Amara. "This is betrayal," Charles Whitmore roared, his voice trembling with fury. "You've humiliated this entire board in front of the public and our investors. This isn't the act of a CEO, it's the act of a traitor." A few fists slammed the table in agreement, a futile attempt to regain control. Eleanor added coldly, "If you've submitted these files to the SEC, you've placed this company in direct legal jeopardy. You're not protecting the company, Amara. You're its greatest threat." The tension pressed down so heavily, it felt like the walls might burst, but Amara stood firm. She rose from her seat and walked slowly to the end of the table, where the light fell fully on her face. Her voice rang out, clear and unshakable. "You call me a traitor?" "No. The betrayal lies in this room. You've lined your pockets with dirty profits, gambling away the livelihoods of employees and risking thousands of shareholders just to enrich yourselves. I am not destroying this company. I am saving it from you." Her words struck like thunderbolts. Some faces turned ghostly white, others clenched their jaws, and a few tried to feign composure while their hands trembled uncontrollably. The special meeting designed to topple Amara had transformed into a public trial where the board themselves were the defendants. Marcus, watching quietly from the back, allowed himself a small smile. In his eyes, Amara was no longer just a CEO, fighting corruption. She was a warrior, and the real battle had only just begun. The special meeting ended in chaos, but the real story began the moment the boardroom doors swung open. Reporters who had waited since morning swarmed forward, microphones and cameras thrust at every board member. Their arrogance was gone. They fumbled, dodged, some even ducked their heads and rushed into private cars. In contrast, when Amara emerged, the crowd erupted in cheers. One journalist shouted, "Amara, do you think you'll lose your position?" After this vote, Amara smiled faintly and replied firmly, "Titles can be lost, but the truth never will." That single line instantly became a headline splashed across every outlet, shared millions of times online. The hashtag #TruthNeverLoses shot to the top of global trends within 24 hours. On television, pundits argued fiercely. Some claimed Amara's boldness risked plunging the company into legal turmoil, but others praised her as a new symbol of transparency and accountability. Most strikingly, retail investors, often ignored by the corporate elite, publicly rallied behind her. "At least she stands with us," one small investor declared on CNN, while the board only stands with their wallets. Public's opinion was ablaze. For Amara, this was no longer an internal corporate battle. It had become a movement where every word she spoke and every step she took had the power to reshape the landscape. Deep inside, she realized, from this moment on, she was no longer just a CEO. She had become the face of a revolution. In a luxury midtown hotel, the board of directors convened a secret meeting. No reporters, no staff, just the familiar faces seated around a long, white-draped table, the golden light exposing every tense crease on their brows. Charles Whitmore slammed his hand on the table. "We are losing control. She's no longer just a CEO. She's becoming a symbol. If this continues, she'll be untouchable." Eleanor nodded coldly. "The only way is a direct strike. We need to tie her to a personal scandal, something that will make the public turn on her instantly." Another member spoke cautiously. "But if the evidence isn't strong, it could backfire. The more we attack, the more support she gains." The air grew suffocating. They all knew Amara held the upper hand in public opinion. But real power still resided with them. Their networks of influence, friendly politicians, and lawyers capable of bending the truth if needed. After hours of heated debate, Charles delivered the verdict through clenched teeth. "Fine. If the public loves her for her transparency, then we'll turn that transparency into the knife that kills her. We'll construct an alternative truth and let them doubt her themselves." In the hushed room, a dark plan began to take shape. And this time, the board wasn't just aiming to topple Amara. They intended to annihilate her image completely. Just a few days later, strange rumors began to spread. At first, they appeared as vague posts on obscure finance blogs. CEO Amara. Johnson linked to possible tax fraud. Then came the insinuations. Powerful female CEO and her secretive private life. What is Amara hiding? Mainstream media quickly picked it up, as if someone were feeding them the stories. Financial news channels brought in analysts who repeated the same question over and over. Is Amara really as transparent as she claims to be? The peak came when a major media outlet released a so-called special report, accusing Amara of using an offshore account for personal gain. The report spread like wildfire. There was no solid proof, but the headline alone was enough to spark waves of doubt. Marcus slammed the paper onto the desk, furious. "This is manufactured. They're fabricating every detail to destroy you." Amara was calmer, though her eyes gleamed with sharp awareness. She knew this was only the opening salvo. The men in the shadows wouldn't stop until they erased her completely. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "Very well. If they want to weaponize the truth against me, then I'll show them just how powerful the truth can be." That day, Amara appeared at a national business forum, a gathering of hundreds of CEOs, politicians, and reporters. Everyone assumed she would avoid the spotlight, stay silent under the storm of allegations. But no. Amara stepped onto the stage. With an almost icy composure, her eyes sharp and her smile like a blade. They say I committed tax fraud. They say I used offshore accounts for personal gain. They say I'm too dangerous to lead a company. Wonderful, isn't it? Because when the powerful feel threatened, they'll do everything to create a distorted version of you. The entire hall went silent. It felt as if she had stretched the air taut with nothing but her words. Amara pressed on, her voice stronger now. Here's the truth. I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes like anyone else. But I have never sold out my integrity for personal gain. And if you want to know what I'm hiding, here it is. She raised a thick file and laid it on the podium. My complete tax records and personal assets from the past 10 years, open to the public, anyone can check. The room erupted. Reporters surged forward, cameras flashing non-stop. In seconds, Amara had flipped the narrative, from accused to the bold architect of radical transparency. She ended with a cold, cutting smile. You want to weaponize the truth against me? Then let the world see. The truth only kills liars. Within a single night, the forum where Amara unveiled her personal records had become the epicenter of global media. News channels replayed the moment she placed that thick file on the podium as if it were a historic performance. Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn buzzed with excitement. The first CEO to reveal her entire tax history. Amara just redefined transparency in business. The hashtag #Truth Only Kills Liars swept like wildfire, spilling beyond finance circles into student communities, office workers, even political spheres. A U.S. senator went live on television declaring, "This is the kind of leadership our era desperately needs." Meanwhile, the board of directors felt cornered. Their campaign of character assassination had backfired, transforming Amara into a global icon. Cracks began to show within their ranks. In a private exchange, Eleanor told Charles coldly, "We're losing allies. The investment funds aren't on our side anymore. If this continues, the ones purged might be us." Charles clenched his fists, his face etched with despair and rage. He knew that if Amara continued unchecked, not only their board seats, but their fortunes, reputations, and even freedom could vanish. And so, in the shadows, they began to contemplate a far more dangerous option, not just to topple Amara politically or through the media, but to remove her from the board altogether, permanently. In a private hotel suite, the golden light cast uneasy shadows across fearful faces. The board met once more, but this time there were no half-hearted debates or vague PR strategies. Charles's voice was hoarse as he growled, "We've tried the press, we've tried the law, and all of it has failed. If we hesitate any longer, Amara will crush us, which means it's time for the final measure." No one asked what the final measure meant. The glances exchanged around the table said it all. They were speaking of something beyond legality, a strike that could end Amara's career, perhaps even her life. Eleanor sat in silence for a long moment before whispering, "But if we go too far, everything could shatter beyond repair." Charles tightened his grip on his leather briefcase, a cold smile on his lips. "And if we do nothing, we disappear. Remember this, it's either her or us." Meanwhile, across town, Amara sat in her high-rise apartment, staring at the shimmering lights of New York through her window. Her phone buzzed constantly with strange calls, her inbox flooded with anonymous threats. Marcus warned her, "They won't stop at the media, Amara. They're desperate now." Amara clenched the armrest of her chair, her eyes burning with resolve. She knew the battle had moved beyond numbers and stock charts. This was no longer just corporate warfare. It was a fight for survival, where she had to protect not only her company, but her very life. Amara was never the type to sit and wait for her enemies to strike. The very next morning, she convened a secret meeting with Marcus and a handful of trusted allies inside the company. The small room, curtains drawn tight, bathed in harsh neon light, felt more like a war strategy bunker than a corporate boardroom. "We must prepare on two fronts," Amara began, her voice razor-sharp. "Legal and personal safety." Marcus nodded, spreading a series of files across the table. "Legally, we now have enough evidence to formally petition the SEC for an investigation. But Amara, this won't just put the board under scrutiny, it will drive them into panic. And when they panic, they'll do anything." Amara met his gaze and nodded slightly. "I know, which is why we need the second front." She produced a special business card, the number of a top private security firm. "I've hired a security team for 24/7 surveillance, not just for me, but for my family, and for every employee who has stood with us. If they want to drag this into the gutter, I'll turn it into a chess game they can't anticipate." A young staffer, once bullied by the board, spoke up. "Amara, why not just step back? It would be so much easier." Amara gave a soft smile, her eyes glowing with unwavering resolve. "Because if I step back, who will stand up for people like you? I'm not fighting just for myself. I'm fighting for all of us, to prove that justice isn't just a word on paper." In that moment, the room seemed to light up. Every gaze fixed on Amara, not just a CEO, but a true leader, guiding them into a battle that was both dangerous and full of hope. Just days after Amara announced her plans for stronger legal and security measures, the board unleashed their most vicious counterattack yet. One evening, national television interrupted programming with a special report. CEO Amara Johnson, accused of abuse of power, allegedly awarding contracts to family members. Alongside the broadcast came leaked documents, a multi-million-dollar contract tied to a small company managed by Amara's distant cousin. Reporters dissected it endlessly, while pundits splashed headlines, "Transparency or Deception." Amara's phone buzzed non-stop. Journalists, investors, even friends bombarded her with calls, all demanding an explanation. Marcus slammed the TV remote down in frustration. "They've fabricated this, I'm sure of it. But in the media, the truth always comes last, and public opinion will eat you alive in the meantime." Amara sat in silence for a long time. This wasn't just an accusation. It was a direct strike at her personal honor, the very thing she had guarded her entire career. For a moment, exhaustion flickered in her eyes. But then she drew a deep breath, gripping the armrest tightly. "Fine," she whispered, her voice calm yet icy. "If they want to use my family as the knife against me, then I'll turn that knife into proof of their desperation." Outside, New York buzzed with speculation, and Amara knew the battle had climbed to a new level, where her honor, her credibility, and even her heart would be tested to the breaking point. The next morning, Amara walked into Halcyon headquarters with eyes sharp as steel and a stride firmer than ever. The entire building buzzed. Employees glanced at her with mixed emotions: worry, admiration, even fear. News of the family contract. Scandal dominated every headline, but instead of dodging, Amara chose to confront it head-on. She called an emergency press conference in the main atrium, where the glass walls reflected dozens of cameras trained on her. No script, no handlers behind her, just Amara, a microphone, and the truth. "They say I favored a relative," Amara began, her voice echoing through the hall. "So let's look at the facts." She raised a fresh stack of documents, the original contract and independent audit reports. "Yes, this company is run by my cousin, but he won the bid publicly at a cost 15% lower than competitors, with proven quality. Here is the audit report, confirming the entire process was transparent. And I challenge anyone to point to a single, Line here that proves otherwise. The press fell silent, broken only by the rapid clicks of cameras. From the back, Marcus allowed himself a faint smile. Amara was not only defending herself, she was turning the attack into a chance to showcase undeniable proof before the world. You can believe in rumors, Amara concluded, her eyes blazing. Or you can believe in data. As for me, I choose data, and the truth will never bow to lies. Amara's press conference tore through the media like a storm. News channels replayed the moment she raised the audit files, and her image standing tall in Halcyon's atrium-flooded social media. Many cheered. This is true transparency. Amara just schooled the board in justice. But doubt lingered. Some financial pundits scoffed on TV. Who's to say those reports weren't staged? Anonymous articles popped up, sowing suspicion that Amara was staging a transparency act to hide something far bigger. Public opinion split sharply. One camp hailed her as the warrior of truth, while the other sneered, calling her the queen of theatrics. In the financial world, this polarization sent Halcyon's stock price lurching violently, like a ship tossed in a storm. Meanwhile, the board boiled with rage. Charles growled in a closed-door meeting. She turns every accusation into a performance. If this continues, she'll walk straight into history as a hero. We need a fatal blow, not legal, but in trust. Eleanor nodded, cold as ice. Public trust is her strongest weapon. Then we must turn that trust into her burden, make people wonder, is Amara truly clean or just better at acting than we are? In the shadows, a new plan began to take shape, more dangerous, more ruthless. And Amara, no matter how strong, would soon face the greatest wave of doubt of her entire career. On Friday night, Amara sat in the studio of a national television network, the lights glaring straight into her face. This was no longer a press conference she controlled. It was a live interview, broadcast to millions across America and Europe. The host was infamous for his sharp style, never afraid to dig into the most uncomfortable questions. Ms. Johnson, he began crisply, the public is divided. Some see you as a symbol of transparency. Others say you're just putting on a show. So tell us, what proof do you have that you truly deserve their trust? The studio fell silent. The camera zoomed close on Amara's face, calm, unshaken. She answered slowly, I don't beg for trust. I prove it through action. I've released my personal records. I've exposed the board's corruption. And I stand ready to take responsibility if any mistake is mine. The host pressed harder. But what if one day we discover you've made mistakes too? Don't you think you'd lose everything? Amara smiled, not evasive, but proud. If one day I am wrong, I will admit it. But I have never chosen lies. And in this world, where deceit has become routine, telling the truth, even when it hurts, is the bravest act of all. The audience erupted into applause, though the show wasn't designed to encourage it. On social media, comments flooded. She's right. Finally, a leader who stands tall. Amara knew this wasn't victory yet, but at least she had regained the initiative. Turning an interview meant to bring her down into a stage where truth shone once again. Inside a private boardroom in a luxury high-rise, the directors lounged in leather chairs, their faces dark with frustration. On the giant screen, Amara's live interview replayed, and every burst of audience applause felt like a dagger stabbing their pride. Charles Whitmore slammed his whiskey glass onto the table, growling, "She turns every accusation into a stage for herself. If this continues, we lose everything. Money, power, even freedom." Eleanor folded her arms, her gaze icy. "Then we do what no one has dared to do, a strike that leaves her unable to rise again. Not through the media, not through the law, but through reality." The room thickened with silence. Everyone knew exactly what she meant. One member whispered nervously, "You mean eliminate her? Permanently?" Eleanor didn't answer right away. She tilted her head and gave a cold, thin smile. Charles slammed his hand down, sealing the discussion with a hiss between his teeth. "Exactly. If Amara Johnson wants war, then we'll show her what real war looks like." Outside, the world still hailed Amara as the symbol of transparency. But in the shadows, the most powerful men were preparing their deadliest strike yet, a strike aimed not only at her career, but at her very life. That night, after working late, Amara drove alone down a nearly empty highway leading out of New York. The sky was heavy with dark clouds, the streetlights casting a sickly yellow glow across her windshield. A soft jazz tune played on the radio, but her mind was anything but calm. She knew the board was desperate, and desperate men were the most dangerous. Suddenly, a black SUV swerved from the next lane, ramming close against her car. Amara jerked the wheel, her car swerving violently. Her heart pounded, sweat slicking her palms on the steering wheel. The SUV didn't back off. It stayed on her tail, flashing its headlights in a cold, deliberate signal. In that instant, Marcus's warning echoed in her mind. They won't stop at the media. They'll do anything. A brutal hit jolted her. Car toward the guardrail. Metal screeched as sparks flew. Fighting for control, she floored the gas, the engine roaring as she pulled away, her chest heaving with terror. The SUV kept chasing until a police cruiser suddenly appeared up ahead. The black vehicle slowed, veered sharply, and vanished into the night. Amara pulled over, gasping for breath, her hands trembling uncontrollably. She knew this was no accident. It was a message. The board had crossed the line from a war of power to a war of survival, and now her very life was the target. The next morning, Amara sat in her office with Marcus, her face still carrying traces of exhaustion after the harrowing night. The coffee cup in her hand trembled slightly, but her eyes burned with a new, unshakable resolve. Marcus entered and tossed a folder onto the table. Traffic cameras caught everything. That black SUV appeared the moment you left Halcyon headquarters, and disappeared the second a police cruiser passed by. This wasn't coincidence, Amara. It was a plan. Amara nodded, exhaling slowly. I know. But Marcus, if we press charges, they'll deny it. They've got money, lawyers, media power. I won't let myself look like a victim begging for pity. I'll turn this into a counterattack. Marcus leaned in, eyes fixed on hers. You mean, go public? Amara's faint smile hardened into steel. Exactly. They want me silent, afraid. So I'll do the opposite. I'll tell the world that I, a CEO, was nearly assassinated by my own board, disguised as an accident. Let's see who the public believes, the men hiding in shadows or the woman willing to stand in the light. For a moment, Marcus said nothing. Then he chuckled softly. Amara, you're unlike any CEO I've ever known. You turn every threat into your stage. Amara clenched her fist, her eyes fierce. No, Marcus. I'm not looking for a stage. I'm looking for justice. And this time, justice will roar louder than ever. 2 days after the accident on the highway, Amara appeared at an unannounced press conference at Halcyon headquarters. No prior notice, no elaborate script, just her, Marcus, and a massive screen behind them. Reporters packed the room, live streams flooding every social platform. Amara stood tall, her eyes blazing. You've heard plenty of rumors about me, but today I'll show you another truth, a truth the board never wanted you to see. She nodded, and Marcus played the footage. Silence swept the room as traffic camera footage filled the screen. The black SUV swerving into Amara's car, the jarring hit, her vehicle swaying, and the SUV vanishing the moment police appeared. No one could deny it was a deliberate attack. Amara's voice dropped, heavy with power. I won't claim to be perfect, But I will claim this. No CEO, no woman, should have to sit behind a wheel in fear of being killed simply for speaking the truth. This isn't just my story. It's the story of the right to live and lead without being threatened. The room erupted into chaos, shouts, flashes, and frantic questions. Within hours, the video spread tens of millions of times. The hashtag #PeaceThey tried to silence her, rocketing to the top of global trends. One major journalist tweeted, "If this can happen in America, in the heart of New York, then it's no longer." Amara's story. It's a wake-up call for all of business. Amara allowed herself a faint smile amid the uproar. She had just turned a cowardly plot into undeniable evidence, and now the world could no longer look away. Within 48 hours of the explosive press conference, the U.S. government stepped in. The Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, announced a full-scale investigation into Halcyon Capital. The Department of Justice declared it would examine criminal implications tied to the deliberate attack on Amara Johnson. The news spread like wildfire. TV channels replayed the SUV footage alongside Amara's defiant press conference, while a major newspaper blared the headline, "From betrayed CEO to global icon, Amara Johnson's war against the shadows." Inside the board, the atmosphere was suffocating. Some members openly voiced fear. One whispered, "We're going to be dragged before Congress for hearings." Even Charles Whitmore, once so arrogant, now sweated through his collar. He slammed the table, but his voice lacked conviction. "We must stand united. If one falls, we all fall." But everyone knew. The cracks were already there. Eleanor stayed silent, her cold eyes scanning the room. She understood. From this point on, survival would be every man for himself. Meanwhile, Amara sat in her office, staring at screens overflowing with news about her. She felt no joy, no triumph, only quiet reflection. For she knew, though the balance of power was tipping, in her favor, enemies backed into a corner were always the most dangerous. That autumn, New York glowed under golden sunlight and a tense atmosphere. But for Amara, the sky felt heavier than ever. She was no longer just a CEO defending her company. She had become the focal point of an entire nation. Congress officially announced public hearings, summoning Amara, Halcyon's board, and a slate of witnesses. The moment the news broke, the media exploded. Headlines screamed, "The hearing of the century, Amara Johnson versus the Power Board." International outlets from London and Paris to Tokyo dispatched correspondents to Washington. Amara knew this wasn't merely a legal battle, it was a war of trust. If she faltered before Congress, her image would shatter in front of millions. But if she stood firm, she wouldn't just save herself, she would set an unprecedented precedent, a black woman CEO, challenging the very roots of a corrupt power system. In her office, Marcus laid a thick stack of files before her. Evidence, testimonies, audit reports, even secret recordings from board meetings. He said quietly, "This is our ammunition. But remember, Amara, in Congress, it's not only the truth that matters. It's how you tell the story that decides who wins." Amara closed her eyes briefly, drawing a deep breath. When she opened them, her gaze was transformed, resolute, blazing, almost unbreakable. She knew the final chapter had begun, and this time her stage was not just Halcyon, not just Wall Street. It was the entire nation. On the day of the hearing, the Capitol was swarming. Reporters jammed the corridors, microphones and cameras raised like a steel forest. Inside the chamber, the lights blazed bright. Rows of lawmakers seated before Amara and the board members. The chair struck the gavel, voice firm. "We are here to determine whether Halcyon Capital engaged in corruption, manipulation, and an attempt to harm its CEO, Amara Johnson." The tension was so sharp, every breath could be heard. A conservative senator spoke first, sternly. Ms. Johnson, you are accusing the men seated beside you of attempting to kill you? What evidence do you have beyond that highway footage? Amara calmly opened her folder, eyes unflinching. Senator, beyond the video, we have surveillance footage from Halcyon's parking garage showing the SUV being checked in by a board-appointed security guard. We also have an audio recording in which a board member states clearly, if she won't stay silent, we'll deal with her another way. The chamber erupted. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras flashed non-stop. Across the table, Charles Whitmore slammed his fist, shouting, "Lies! These are fabricated documents. She's staging a drama to destroy us." Amara turned toward him, her voice like ice. "Mr. Whitmore, if I'm staging this, why do your hands tremble when I mention the recording? Congress can play it right now for the entire nation if you wish." A heavy silence fell. The balance had shifted. For the first time in history, a black woman CEO stood before the United States Congress and turned a hearing into a stage where the truth could no longer be buried. The congressional chamber went silent for a few seconds. Then a senator nodded to the technician. A click echoed, and suddenly the recording filled the room. "If she won't stay quiet, we'll deal with her another way. A car accident. No one will question it." The raspy voice was unmistakably that of a board member. Several lawmakers exchanged horrified glances. Reporters nearly leapt from their seats, live streams capturing every explosive second. Amara sat, still, needing no words. She let the recording speak for itself, a weapon forged from the board's own corruption. Charles Whitmore shot to his feet, shouting, "Cut it off! This is fabricated! This is—" But the chair struck the gavel hard. "Order! Mr. Whitmore, every word you say now will be entered into the record, and may be used against you in criminal proceedings." The chamber erupted. Some senators stood outright, demanding an immediate investigation. Outside, the headlines blared. "Assassination plot against CEO exposed in Congress. Halcyon in turmoil." Amara lifted her head, her eyes blazing. She knew this moment would enter history, not just because she had survived, but because the truth had been spoken in a place where no shadow power could bury it. After the historic hearing, events unfolded like a storm, sweeping everything in its path. The SEC launched criminal investigations. Several board members were taken into custody. Charles Whitmore and other powerful names were indicted on charges of corruption, manipulation, and conspiracy to commit assassination. On the news, the once mighty board, who had sat in smug power, were now shown in handcuffs, their faces pale with defeat. Amara, once the betrayed CEO, was now hailed as a symbol of transparency, courage, and justice. She felt no triumph. At her final press conference, Amara stood before hundreds of reporters, her voice calm but unyielding. "This is not my victory alone. This is the victory of truth, of employees who were silenced, of small investors who were ignored. Halcyon will no longer be a company of shadows. It will be a company of light." The room rose to its feet in thunderous applause. The hashtag #TruthOne spread worldwide, Amara's face gracing magazine covers from New York to London. Yet when the applause faded, Amara returned to her office, gazing quietly at the city through her window. Marcus asked softly, "So you've won. But, Amara, will you stop here?" She smiled faintly, her eyes distant yet burning bright. "No, Marcus, this is only the beginning. Because if this system can try to destroy a CEO for speaking the truth, then how many others out there are being suffocated? I can't stop. Not while justice remains a privilege instead of a right." Outside, the sunset bathed New York, brilliant, fierce, and full of promise. One chapter had closed, but a new journey for Amara Johnson had only just begun.